Let's shift our focus to sexual abuse. At the end of this section, you will be able to define sexual abuse, identify two types of sexual abuse, recognize characteristics of abusers and their targets, and respond to and report sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is engaging a child in sexual activity. While this often involves physical contact, it can also include exposing a child to explicit sexual materials or activities. Child sexual abuse is considered a public health crisis by experts and health organizations. Unfortunately, sexual abuse often goes unreported or undiscovered, but studies show that 1 out of 4 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will experience sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. The majority of sexual abusers are known to the child and to their parents. While most instances of sexual abuse occur in the home by a relative or trusted adult, sexual abuse also occurs outside of the home across organizations in the community. While a majority of abusers are adults, more than a third of sexual abuse is committed by other youth. In short, sexual abuse can occur in any setting where someone could also have access to a child. Types of sexual abuse. Adult on youth. The most common type of sexual abuse is adult on youth abuse. Abusers are often parents, step-parents, or other adult family members. Abusers can also be other adults known to the child, such as neighbors, teachers, coaches, or youth leaders. Abusers misuse their position of trust and authority over children to engage them through the grooming process in sexual abusive activity. A growing form of sexual abuse of children is abuse committed by other youth. Youth sexual abusers are usually older siblings, relatives such as older cousins or family friends. Youth abusers are typically 4 to 5 years older, but may be the same age as the victim. Youth on youth abuse is more likely to occur during overnight activities such as sleepovers and campouts, especially where there is little or no adult supervision. Youth abusers are more likely to use some type of game playing activity that may begin normally but escalates into sexually abusive behavior. Youth abusers may also use pornographic material to entice and manipulate younger youth. Youth on youth policy. BSA policy clearly states that sexual activity and all forms of public displays of affection are prohibited. Public displays of affection, including holding hands, frontal embraces, and kisses. It is natural for youth to create relationships and friendships. Supervision, though, and monitoring and communication by adult leaders are key elements to preventing the following: youth engaging in any form of sexual activity, youth engaging in abusive or non-consensual sexual activity in relationships, youth attempting to meet up. Strict adherence to Scouting's barriers to abuse is key. Adult supervision must occur during tenting and nighttime activities and include monitoring high-risk areas. Do not assign youth members more than 2 years apart in age to sleep in the same tent, and enforce the no drugs and no alcohol policies. Use of the buddy system and respect for privacy provide additional barriers. All incidents of inappropriate activity involving sexual matters, regardless of whether the activity is consensual, must be investigated and reported to the program activity leader. Inappropriate consensual conduct should normally result in parental or guardian notification and immediate removal from the program activity. Inappropriate activity may also result in revocation of membership. Non-consensual or abusive contact must be reported to law enforcement. After reporting to law enforcement, the matter must also be reported to the local Scout executive so that appropriate action may be taken. If unable to reach the Scout executive, contact the Scouts First helpline. Ensure that notification has been made to parents and guardians.
Child sexual abuse takes on a number of different forms, if you will. It, by definition, involves inappropriate sexual activity by an adult or a person who could still be an adolescent, for example, themselves, with younger children of either gender. Sexual abuse is discovered often, but much more frequently is not discovered. So we really don't have an estimate of exactly how much occurs.
Sexual abuse can occur at the hands of adults. This is the type of abuse that most often makes the papers, that most people are aware of. The dirty old man or the school teacher that gets arrested or what have you. But in fact, there is a significant issue with older youth engaging in inappropriate sexual behavior and indeed criminal behavior with younger youth, and that is a problem that is, depending on which study you look at, is either a problem that's increasing in frequency or something that we're simply becoming more aware of.
Youth on youth abuse constitutes a significant percentage of child sexual abuse in our country. So, according to the United States Department of Justice data, 25% of all sexual assaults in our country are committed by children, those below the age of 18. It's very rare that the sex offender is unknown to the child or unknown to the family. They're usually somebody who's worked their way into the family if they're not already born into the family, and that is part of why they often get away with their crimes. First thing an offender does is they carefully select the community they want to be part of. They do pay attention to whether or not you have policies. If so, are they good policies? If they're good policies, do you actually enforce them, and are they accompanied with training? So the weaker you are on that spectrum, the more likely a sex offender will want to be part of your congregation, your community. Once a sex offender selects your community, they then begin to carefully study the children in your care. They pay attention to things such as, gosh, what sort of home does this child come from? Are they being neglected or abused in any way?
Grooming is, put simply, is a form of manipulation. It's very subtle. These men are very adept at utilizing charm and gradual desensitization to encourage the child to participate in what is really sort of bringing them down the path toward what eventually will become an abusive incident. They move forward push the boundaries to see what the child will tolerate. When they sense the child may be becoming a bit uncomfortable, then they will retreat, and then they will do other things to desensitize the child. They may expose the child to pornography. They may expose the child to substances, drugs, or alcohol. They may engage in progressively more invasive touch, such as massages or other types of behavior. They may acclimate the child to photography, to being filmed. In our society, children are taught from very young ages to respect their elders. They're taught that adults tend to give them good advice, whether it's a teacher or a coach or a parent or a grandparent. Adults are there to be respected. They have the wisdom and the experience in the world to provide guidance. They may take a role as teacher or as a faith leader or as a coach, someone who the parents, they actually see the parents relate to this adult in this respectful way. They see their own parent saying, don't speak to Ms. Jones like that. Don't backtalk your coach. If your coach tells you something to do, you need to do it. Or if your teacher tells you something, you need to be quiet and do it.
They also groom the parents of the child. So they pay attention to mom or dad and what are their needs. They'll help out mom or dad. They'll be the very best friend of the parents. They'd love to come over and play cards or have a drink or go to a ball game with the parents because they also know they need the parents on their side as well.
Pay attention to people who like your kids more than you do. And it sounds horrible to say that out loud because you want to think that everybody loves your kid, which is a wonderful thing, but we know that offenders most often use attention and affection to break kids' safety rules.
So the very policies such as too deep leadership that the Boy Scouts have, as well as no one-on-one contact, is very important. It's really a good policy for parents to follow as well. For example, if your child's invited to a sleepover, ask those critical questions such as, how many adults are going to be present during this overnight visitation?
So this is why we have policies that we're going to respect the privacies of kids. Adults are not going to be watching kids go to the bathroom. They're not going to be showering with these children. They will respect their privacy. We're not going to be skinny dipping. We're not going to be taking off our shirts, the sort of things that sex offenders like to do. That's why we have those policies. It can serve as a deterrent because it's one more barrier the sex offender has to overcome.
Abusers are smart. They will frequently study organizations and select those that have weak policies in order to more easily access youth. The abuser uses deception to blend into the organization he has chosen to target. It is difficult to determine just by physical appearance alone who may be harmful to our children. The behavior and methods of an abuser, however, to provide red flags for others engaged adults to notice. Abusers don't simply groom youth. They also groom families, organizations, even entire communities through manipulation, charm, gifts, and favors. They slowly befriend the family to gain access to the child. Abusers are masters at sensing and manipulating a child's need for love, attention, and affection. They often escalate the manipulation into physical contact by using progressive, invasive touch, or employing sexual gameplay as a method of desensitizing the child. Identifying grooming behavior can be challenging. It may not appear illegal. However, it may violate an organization's policies or code of behavior or a community's expectation of behavior. Some grooming behavior is not illegal, but it may violate the youth protection policies. For example, an adult may send a text directly to a youth without including another adult leader. This is a violation of the BSA's youth protection policies. It's okay to question people's motives and actions. You can do it in a way that is not accusatory or inflammatory. As an adult leader, your goal is to create a safe environment for kids. Remember, youth protection begins with you.
I was a light sleeper, still am to this day. And I woke up in the middle of the night to her bedroom door opening. I didn't think much of it. Heard the door open, I looked over, and there was a man that lived in the home with her, and it was her uncle. So when he opened the door that night, looking in, I thought he was making sure we were both asleep and was gonna leave, but that wasn't the case. And this man came in the room, and where I was sleeping on the ground, suddenly began stroking my hair. And I remember getting up, looking up, and I'm like, what are you doing? Finding it so strange. And he went like this. Well, of course, being a 6-year-old, having this authority figure standing over you, you're terrified. So I listened to him, stayed quiet. One thing led to another, pulled the sleeping bag down, and for the first time in my life, not the last, sexually abused me. And I'll never forget being so utterly confused. Why is he doing this? What is he doing? You know, I had never been talked to about this. So I didn't even know how to put words at 6 years old to what he had done.
We had a regular babysitter. One time my parents were going out. Her son, older son, kept us. It's all predators. They groom you. And he had sexual acts with me, and then the threats, and then my life changed forever. All predators first, they start with kind of telling you sexual stories, and you're not really sure what this is all about. Back then, showing me little sexual cartoons, little flip books, and just lulling you in. They lull you in, and you don't know about sex. You don't understand. You think it's okay. You're not sure, and then you realize, unfortunately, too late, that that's not something that should be done or you should be doing.
What he took away from me, what he fundamentally broke, was my ability to trust another human being in a way that still, even at that time, I was wavering. I had problems. It was hard for me to trust other people. But this was the first time in my life an adult had actually built up a sense of trust. I felt safe around him. He intentionally did things to welcome me into his home and into his heart. And he then acted in a way that completely shattered my capacity to trust and almost shattered my ability to be able to love anyone else. Who would I tell? You have to understand, my parents were not terrible people, but they were hurting people. They were people who had a lot of their own problems and issues, and I knew from a very early age that they weren't going to be able to help me or protect me.
I was a stay-at-home mom. We homeschooled. We lived out in the country. I could name every single friend that my daughter had. She did her homework online in front of me in the kitchen. My daughter was 14, but she was very naive. She was very sheltered. And we, because we didn't know what was going on around us, didn't have time to equip her. We thought that the natural protections of being very involved family, tight-knit circles, being out in the country, were the kind of barriers that would give us some space. They don't work anymore in the cyber community. It all started very, very innocently enough, where he would talk to her about, is your family coming to the church meeting? My wife and I will be there. To, he brought a boy to church that she liked, and he picked up on it. And then the emails were all about introducing him.
Too many people think the pedophile is the guy or woman in the trench coat that flashes you, who looks, like you can see him. You can't tell, but there are warning signs.
So many parents sit their kids down and talk to them about stranger danger. You don't answer the door when we're gone. You don't talk to strangers. But 93% of the time, it's not strangers hurting our kids. It's someone you know and trust. But sadly, our society focuses so much on stranger danger, when we really need to be worried about the babysitter, the coach, the family member harming our kids. I definitely believe had someone educated me on this, I would have spoken up.
So, what do you do when you identify a child who is being abused, or a child tells you they are being abused? Adults should recognize that talking with children about maltreatment, especially sexual abuse, is not comfortable for anyone. Remember that a child's first disclosure and your response may have lasting effects. How you respond to a youth who discloses sexual abuse to you is important. Let the child know that you believe them, that you care, and that you want to help. Finally, remember to report the suspected abuse to the proper authorities. People often come up with excuses for not reporting They may be afraid that they are wrong or that they might somehow hurt someone by reporting. However, in scouting, our primary concern is for the welfare of the child. It is always better to report a possible instance of abuse. If you see or suspect child abuse or maltreatment, call 911 immediately and make any other reports required by your state. Some states require that incidents of child sexual abuse be reported to Child Protective Services, or CPS. To find your state's child abuse reporting number, go to the link described here. Remember that the state of Texas also has additional reporting requirements. Failing to report suspected child abuse may be a criminal law violation in your state. It is important to note that all states allow immunity from criminal and civil liability for good faith reporting of suspected abuse, even if it is later determined to be unfounded. After reporting to law enforcement, the matter must also be reported to the local scout executive so that appropriate actions may be taken. If unavailable to reach the scout executive, contact the Scouts First helpline. Ensure notification has been made to the parents and guardian after notifying law enforcement. You'll find both of these links in your Youth Protection Training Resources handout. Remember, law enforcement's responsibility is for investigating allegations of child abuse regardless of whether it involves family or non-family members, while child protective agencies generally respond to investigating allegations of child abuse by family members. If a family member is alleged to be responsible for the abuse, consult law enforcement or the local child protective agency for guidance in regards to parental notification or of reported abuse. Sexual abuse can frequently be difficult to identify. Remember, a child's behavior may or may not be an indicator of abuse. Keep in mind that what you have observed is often only one piece of the puzzle. If unsure, it is always better to report what you have seen. When you see concerning behaviors, trust your instincts and report to the program activity leader, such as the camp director or scoutmaster. We now have several scenarios, David's story and Charlie's story. I'm going to show both clips here, and when we return to the Zoom room, we will be discussing both of these stories and how they are impacted by the events that take place.
When a child is sexually abused, it is almost always by someone the child knows and trusts. In many instances, the individual may even be well liked and respected in the community. What may appear to be appropriate interaction in a social setting may serve as the early steps in the grooming process for an offender. Through this grooming process, many offenders gain the child's trust through attention, gifts, and favors. The offender may also groom a child's parents to gain their trust, get more access, and increase the chance that the abuse will not be suspected. By offering the child inappropriate access to things such as alcohol, drugs, and sexually explicit material, the offender looks to create an emotional connection that enables continued access and may discourage the child from reporting this and future behavior.
It is not uncommon for the offender to be an older youth or to be in a position of authority, such as a youth leader, and have the trust of adults. Often, the offender will seem to be a friendly member of the group, but this supportive demeanor can escalate into a situation that sets the stage for abuse when youth protection policies are violated. The offender may seek to exploit the target youth, relying on their size or position of authority. The target youth is typically much younger, new to the program, or has some disability or perceived difference. Either way, the youth offender will look for opportunities to isolate the youth, typically when sleeping, showering, or using the restroom, when adult supervision may not be present. Unfortunately, it is not unusual for other youth to know about the abuse or to be present during the abuse. Because of this, it is vitally important that adult leaders remain vigilant and that other youth are willing to intervene and report any concerns.
Please return to the Zoom room for our youth protection training course, where we'll discuss both of these situations with David and Charles and identifying the behavior that was inappropriate in both. Thank you.